Good evening. You are welcome to our next lesson of virtual teaching. The last time we met, we looked at the scramble for and partition of Africa, and specifically we looked at the reasons that led to the partition of Africa, and we established that the reasons were has been categorized into three main categories, and we had economic, social, and political. And we looked at some of the economic reasons that they needed a place to, the Europeans needed a place to invest their surplus profits. They also needed a new market for their surplus produce. Some of the social, we also said that they wanted to spread Christianity. The Europeans, again, they also, of course, wanted a place to settle their surplus population as a result of the Industrial Revolution. And we also looked at the fact that the last one, political reasons, as a result of the Russo-Turkish War, which had resulted in the balance of powers in Europe. And the last one about political reasons was the fact that during the First World War they needed a place to berth their ship so that they could use that as a strategic place for their ships to berth. Good. As a follow-up to that same discussion, today we are looking at the Berlin Conference, which took place in 1884 to 1885. And this conference, of course, conference, we mean conference, the meaning of conference, as you hear, we are going for a conference, we are going for youth conference, we are going for whatever conference. It's basically the coming together of people from different places for a meeting. And so basically, the Berlin Conference will therefore mean coming together, of course, in the layman's view, it is the coming together of a lot of people to meet. And they met at a place called Berlin. And I hope you know where Berlin is. We in Germany today. Berlin is in Germany. So this was a conference which took place in Germany. We are going to look at which people took part in the conference, what was the outcome of the conference, and of course other issues concerning the conference. So let's quickly take a look at our lesson objectives as we do every day. So by the end of the lesson, you should be able to state some of the recommendations and agreements at the Berlin Conference. So when they met, those who went for the conference, we don't know those who went yet, but what were some of the recommendations and the agreement that they had at the conference. By the end of the lesson, you should be able to state some of the recommendations and agreement. But before we even go to the recommendations and the agreement, let's first of all know those who were engaged in the conference, those who took part in the conference, and what was the conference all about. Now, the Berlin Conference was a meeting between European nations to formulate rules on how to peacefully partition or share Africa to prevent a possible outbreak of war among themselves. So you remember that we said that because of the scramble for lands in Africa, it nearly led into a war. And so the conference was a meeting between all the European powers that were scrambling for lands in Africa. And I hope you can be able to state some of the European powers that took part in the scramble. Those were the same European countries that were going to meet at Berlin. And the reason for their meeting was to formulate rules on how to peacefully partition or share Africa to prevent any possible outbreak of war. You understand? And so it was basically just to put Africa on the table, as you can see on the map at the downstairs. I will zoom it for you to see it properly. Just to put Africa on the table and share peacefully, so that they will not fight among themselves. And you should note that the Berlin Conference did not initiate the scramble for Africa. So it was not the Berlin Conference that started the scramble. I hope you agree to that. The Berlin Conference did not start the scramble, because the scramble was already there. It only gave an international recognition to a situation that was already in motion. And so the Berlin Conference did not start the scramble. The scramble was already, in motion. The Berlin Conference only came to recognize that these people are scrambling. Okay, and so we should all come together and share the land peacefully. Good. Now, the immediate cause for the conference, so, in everything we have remote and immediate causes. We can say the causes that we looked at was the remote causes in our previous discussion. But the immediate cause was the rivalry over the Congo. Now, the Congo was very, very strategic place for all the European powers. And Congo was rich in, I think, rubber. Now, Portugal's claim over the Congo territory and river was supported by Britain and opposed by France and Belgium. Now, the Belgians, King Leopold, claimed that the Congo was for him. It was his. Portugal also claimed the same Congo and the river, as the Congo River, as part of, or it is also Portugal's. But then Britain went to support Portugal, that yes, indeed, the Congo area belongs to Portugal. The French also supported the Belgians, that yes, indeed, the Congo area was also for them. And so there was the possibility of the issue degenerating into an open war, which would involve all the major European nations, because when there is war, these European nations have allies. Okay, like the way France is supporting Belgium and Portugal is supporting, and Britain is supporting Portugal. Should there be a war between Portugal and Belgium, you realize that France will enter into the war, even though it is not a war. Britain will also enter into the war. And don't forget that Britain and France also have allies, or they've also formed allies with other European countries. And so they will also join the war just because their allies are fighting. And that possibly even led to the outbreak of the First World War. Now, let's move on. Then, so the conference, in order to stop this, this possibility of the issue degenerating or, resulting into war, one man who had by this time become the first German chancellor, and that is the image that you see there. He was called Otto von Bismarck. He was the first German chancellor. He decided to organize the conference and call all these European powers to Berlin, to his place in Germany. And the conference ushered in a period of heightened colonial activity by European powers, which eliminated or overrode most existing forms of African autonomy and self-governance. So Otto von Bismarck decided to call all the European powers to his city in Berlin, that is in Germany, to peacefully, or to formulate rules on how to peacefully partition and share Africa, so that it will prevent any war. And you see, the conference, after the conference, it ushered in a new period, because after the conference, they had shared Africa, the Europeans had shared Africa among themselves. And this, of course, we are saying that heightened colonial activities. All the African states that were autonomous, that had self-governments, the accounts were autonomous, they were not under any rule. The Dahomes were autonomous, the Benis were autonomous, the Sudanese were. You realize that all the states that were autonomous were all overruled by the Europeans, and they were all colonized. They all came under the Europeans' authority. mainly because of this conference. Because after this conference, it gave that former backing, that you can go out there and take over the lands that you so wish for after they have agreed on whatever they agreed on. Now, 14 European countries participated in the conference. So 14 of them participated. We have some examples there for you: Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, Italy, Spain, in the United States. You can check on the others. We have about, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of them. Check on the other 7. Now, what will be the main aim of the meeting? I think we have said it. If you are smart, you will be able to identify the main aim of the meeting. Now, France gained the lion's share of the West African colonies, followed by Britain. So when we looked at the map, we realized that the map that we looked at initially, France, as I asked you the question, I don't know if you got it correct, but I am hoping that you got it correct. France got the lion's share, the biggest of them. Go back and look at the map again, and you will see that France got the lion's share. And of course, the British acquired 4 territories in West Africa. So you could be asked the 4 territories that the British, or areas that the British acquired. The British acquired only 4 in West Africa. We have the Gambia, Sierra Leone, Ghana, and Nigeria. Good. Now let me zoom so that you can see. This is Otto von Bismarck, the man who initiated the Berlin Conference. That's his face. And then picture you see beneath or under him was when the Europeans also agreed to share Africa, and that is them sitting there and talking and trying to partition Africa among themselves. So let them go and look at some of the recommendations for peaceful partition so that they won't fight. Let's go and look at some of the agreements that they had so that they will not resort to war. Let's take a look at some of the agreements that they had so that they did not resort to war. So quickly, now these were the arrangements made at the Berlin Conference. These were some of the recommendations of we call it the General Act, or the recommendations of the Berlin Conference. Now, the conference resolved to end slavery by Africans and Islamic powers. So one day, all the European countries agreed. So we say the General Act or recommendation of the Berlin Conference. One of their agreements at the Berlin Conference was that they will end slavery by African and Islamic powers. So all the European countries will not engage in slavery anymore. Don't go and take the land and enslave them, or be buying slaves from them. So they all decided to end slavery. 2, the Congo was given to King Leopold II as his private property. I made mention of King Leopold. So which country was he? And he was the king of Belgium. So Congo was given to King Leopold in order to avoid the conflict. But remember, that was the immediate cause of the Berlin Conference. So Congo was given to Leopold. It was taken from Portugal and was given to Leopold as his private property. Can you imagine that? Congo as his private property, the whole country as his private property. Now, the 14 signatories, like the 14 European countries, will have free trade throughout the Congo Basin, and that is the river. So they were fighting over the Congo and the river. That's the Congo Basin, and it was where the Europeans used their ships to pass through, in trading. So the Congo Basin, that's the river area, was to be free. It was to be open for everybody, free trade. You could trade there with anyone. It wasn't given to anyone. And this was in order to avoid any possible war. You understand? So let's give the Congo to everybody, the basin, the river to everybody. Whilst we give the land to the opposite. The fourth one, all European powers should be free to trade in the Congo basin, and they should all maintain free navigation on the Niger and the Congo River. I think they are almost the same with the third one. Let's look at the fifth one. The principle of effective occupation was introduced to stop powers from setting up colonies in name only. Thus, the European powers expected any member who claimed of a territory to establish effective government in that territory. So what happened was that the principle of effective occupation, what do we mean by effective occupation? Here they told themselves, or they instructed themselves, that don't set colonies in name only. Some of them will just put their mouth on this part of the land, so the Gold Coast is for me, but they've not even stepped foot there. The Europeans who will claim probably, for example, Gold Coast belongs to me, they will just say it, and they've not even been there before, but they just claim it. Here we are saying that they are saying that don't set up colonies in name only. If you claim a colony belongs to you, go there and establish an effective government on that territory. So don't just sit somewhere and say, oh, Ghana is for me. No, go there, form a government in Ghana and rule them. That is what effective occupation was about. Go there, establish a government there and rule them. Now, any fresh act, the next one, any fresh act of taking possession of any portion of the African coast would have to be notified by the power taking possession. So if you had wanted to take any fresh, the African coast, it wasn't every place that had been colonized. But if you had wanted to take a new fresh, for instance, we know that Gold Coast belongs to the British. But if the British want to take another fresh coastal land which does not belong to any European powers, they should notify the other European powers that I am taking this coastal land to, in addition to what I have. The last two, every imperial power was to be free to extend its coastal occupations within certain limits into the interior and establish a sphere of influence there. So if, for instance, the British, by this agreement or act, the British who were stationed along the coast of Ghana, that's Gold Coast, that is Cape Coast and Accra and area, they were free to extend their occupation inland, that is to come into the Ashantis area, the northern area, that is deep into the country, and also, add all those areas to theirs. And this particular act gave the British that impetus to come into Asante on several occasions to bombard Asante in 1874, bombard Asante in 1900 in the Ya Asantewaa War and the Sagaranti War, because per this act they were supposed to take over Asante, and we shall look at some of the consequences of this act as we move on in our discussion. The last one was that treaties signed with African chiefs were to be considered as valid titles to their sovereignty. Treaties signed with African chiefs were to be considered as valid titles to their sovereignty, and this makes no sense, because signing a treaty with an African chief does not mean that the chief has given a sovereign right. When we say sovereign right, it says, I have given you my right, come and rule me. So if you sign, the chief thinking he's signing a treaty to the British, whether you sign that you give your sovereignty or not, they will consider it as giving your sovereign right to them. That is why some people say the Bond of 1844 was the beginning of colonial rule in Ghana. Okay, but indeed, the chiefs were thinking they are signing treaties of protection so that you can protect them. But then they are saying no, it should be considered as your sovereign right. So these were some of the issues we can talk about. So we bring our lesson to an end. This is a trial work, and you can hope you'll be able to answer the questions there. Subscribe to the page and recommend to your friends. We shall meet some other time. Bye.